Hi, my friends. Matt McGory here. I'm wanting to share something with you. This is definitely the most vulnerable thing I've ever shared, and is a conversation that I haven't even had with a lot of my closest friends. If you see me looking off to the side, I am referencing notes. I haven't shared it primarily because of fear of career discrimination, and also, people making assumptions about what I can and can't do, and I know that this is likely to happen anyway, but it feels really important to share regardless. It's also something where I've dealt with a lot of people unconsciously minimizing my experiences and projecting their own assumptions and their own ignorance onto me, which is deeply painful and exhausting, especially coming from those that I know personally and other activists that I have grown to trust. So I've had COVID twice. They were both mild infections, April 2022 and April 2023. And I've never fully recovered. So this is what's called long COVID. And I often meet people who have no idea about long COVID, have never heard about it, and that they only think that the negative outcomes from COVID can really be either hospitalization or death. So it feels important for me to share so other people understand and to raise awareness. Pause for sound. Long COVID can have up to 200 different symptoms. It can affect every organ of the body, and it can cause lifelong chronic illnesses like ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, formerly known as chronic fatigue syndrome, which I have been diagnosed with, but much milder than other people's. In its moderate and severe stages, it can have a quality of life equivalent to stage 4 cancer. The long COVID has dramatically changed my life. I have debilitating fatigue that doesn't get better even if I sleep 10 or 12 hours a night. I have post-exertional malaise, or PEM, which basically means that I feel sick or poisoned after exerting much cognitive or physical effort. So some things that I love that I can't do anymore are exercising, lifting weights, hiking, and reading an hour a day like I used to do. I have dysautonomia, which is a dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system where the heart becomes tachycardic, meaning it beats over 100 beats per minute, doing not much, including just standing up. I have brain fog, which is actually a cute little name for brain damage, and cognitively I'm just not as sharp as I used to be. It's given me anxiety and depression, sleep difficulties, and insomnia for the first time in my life. I used to be a great sleeper. I have to use special glasses to look at my computer screen. I have something called Raynaud's syndrome, which is where parts of my body get disproportionately cold and my fingertips and toes will turn white when I'm exposed to cold. And I have a large vascular lesion in my left quad muscle that initially was thought to possibly be a tumor. It protrudes out, and I have to get it monitored every 6 months, and there's a possibility still that they might have to remove my vastus medialis, which is a foot-long major muscle of the quad muscles, which is not my idea of a good time. So there are no approved treatments for long COVID and no cures, and the only way to avoid getting it is to avoid getting COVID or to limit the amount of times that you get it. Some people may find degrees of recovery from long COVID, but you basically have to become your own expert, and it's basically trial and error to find what works. Studies show that very few people actually fully recover, and many just adapt to a new baseline. Some recent studies have shown that many people who have cognitive deficits don't even recognize that they do because of the cognitive deficits. I also do believe that a lot of people have long COVID and other lasting health issues from COVID that they don't recognize as coming from that. Partly because the effects can be so wide-reaching and varied, and it's hard to pinpoint where they've come from. At this point, I know at least 15 people, not including those I've met in the long COVID community, who have varying forms of long COVID who know that they do. From new asthma and other chronic illnesses to narcolepsy, significant fatigue, difficulty sleeping, and more. I think many people feel that because their health issues are not as significant as other people's with long COVID, that it can't actually be that, which is just not true. The truth is, there's a wide range of how bad it can be, and it's often undiagnosed. A recent study showed that 400 million people worldwide have been affected by long COVID, and it has cost the economy $1 trillion globally. I'm also a caretaker of someone who's been exponentially more impacted by long COVID than I have. They are mostly housebound and often bedbound. They can't work, and they are physically able to shower once a week because of the amount of energy that it takes. And they often have to spend large amounts of time in a dark, silent room with no stimulus in order to recover from exertion. They have full body pain at a level that is unimaginable for those of us that don't have chronic pain. And they have steadily gotten worse as time has gone on. And as I've been in the long COVID community more and more, I've met more and more people where these are common symptoms and common ways of having to live. I'll say regardless of the odds, I'm committed to doing everything I can to get some recovery, even if it never takes me back to normal. Recently, after seeing my third specialist and paying thousands of dollars for medical treatments, they found my first abnormal test result, my first biomarker of long COVID, endothelial dysfunction, which is damage to the inner lining of my blood vessels, all 60,000 miles of them, and stage 4 out of 4 blood clots, otherwise known as significant and widespread. And you know that it's not good at all when the word stage is involved. It's never stage 4 joy and exuberance. Many of us haven't known this, but COVID is actually a vascular disease. And this is the reason that we've likely seen an increase in heart attacks and strokes in younger people in recent years. Obviously, if I had not known about these things in myself, that would have placed me at a much greater risk of heart attack and stroke as well. A new study of 10,000 people showed that no matter the severity of your acute COVID infection, the risk of heart attack and stroke stayed elevated for 3 years after infection. To be honest, I was in denial about my own long COVID for some time. And I think it was easy to be, because whenever I said to someone, I think I maybe have long COVID, there didn't seem to be much of an answer or what to do about it or ways to know if I did or didn't have it. Of course, society rewards us for pushing through, and that's what I did, which likely made a lot of these things worse. I also thought that it would get better on its own, but it didn't. I think I was partly in denial because I knew that if I really had long COVID, then that would mean that I probably couldn't afford to get COVID again. And in a world that has moved on from COVID, this is increasingly difficult, especially in a profession that requires me to be unmasked to do my job as an actor. If I admitted to myself that I couldn't afford to get COVID again, my whole life would have to change, and it has. Dealing with the effects of chronic illness and disability is the hardest thing that I've ever dealt with. Dealing with trying not to get COVID again in a world where most people think it's okay to get COVID over and over again, and that it's not a big deal to spread it to others, is tied with being the hardest thing that I've ever had to deal with. The studies show that the risk of getting long COVID is cumulative. That means that each new infection comes with an increased risk of chronic health issues that may or may not be able to be solved. That means that just because you haven't had long COVID so far, that doesn't mean that it may not happen in the future, as every new infection increases the chance of it happening. Or if you had mild symptoms after one COVID infection, the symptoms could become more prominent after the next one. That's what happened with me. And as much as I know that this is probably really hard to hear, avoiding getting COVID again over and over again is actually really important. I know that doing everything in your power to avoid it may seem like a goal too far out of reach at the moment. So I would like to suggest starting with something in between pretending it's 2019 and completely changing every aspect of your life. Doing some risk mitigation just makes sense. Doing zero risk mitigation is likely a sign of living in avoidance, potentially a trauma response. I know this because that was my response too. And it's just not in line with what thousands of studies of COVID are showing us about the impacts of repeated infections. I'm breaking this into 2 videos because I understand that it's a lot to process and to take in. I do appreciate you taking the time to watch. I'm sending you all love, and I'll release another video in another couple days.